So welcome back to the Resilience Collective, where today we are talking about addiction. So I'm here with my co-host, Amantha King. Do you want to introduce yourself, Amantha?
Hi, yes, I'm Amantha King. I'm an executive performance strengths coach, and I also wear another hat in that I'm a workplace menopause consultant as well. So thank you, Lisa.
And I'm Lisa Lloyd of It's Time for Change, and I'm a psychologist working with organisations around the right culture for people to thrive, and I'm also a psychotherapist for one day a week. We are delighted to be joined by Richie Paxton today. He works with the Epic Restart Foundation, which is a UK charity that rebuilds lives after gambling harm. So thank you for joining us. Would you like to tell us a little bit more, Richie, about what you do and what the foundation is all about?
Yeah, thanks, Lisa. So, like Lisa says, I'm Richie. Got lived experience of multiple addictions, and then once I did manage to stop and sort myself out, which took rehab, I then thought, how am I going to give back? And a few years into my recovery, I ended up going back to university, got a counselling degree, and then ended up working in Epic Restart Foundation from its outset, from the beginning. And what Epic is all about is, like Lisa says, is rebuilding positive lives after gambling harm. So a lot of people struggle with addiction of many kinds, and we specifically focus on those who've suffered gambling-related harm. And what I mean by that is, gambling addiction has took over their life in some way. A lot of people end up stopping gambling, and you can do that, and there is hope out there, which is what I really want to get out there. Is if you are struggling with any kind of addiction, then there is hope, and you can change it around, but you have to do a little bit of work to get there. A lot of people stop gambling, but they're still left with what we call legacy harms, the legacy harms of gambling. So a lot of people have broken relationships, they have lack of self-worth, lack of confidence. They've got a lot of debt to try and sort out and manage. And they've also probably put their health and well-being on the back burner a little bit and not really focused on that. So they're the kind of three pillars of our organisation, is improving people's health and well-being, helping people rebuild confidence, resilience, self-worth, and then helping them manage relationships that might be broken or trust lost, and trying to help them build new support networks. And by doing that, we hopefully help people go on to live a better life. That, for me, the saying that really resonates with me is, build a life you don't need to escape anymore. And I think once people are starting to do that, they can really go on and be whoever or whatever they want to be.
It's so important, isn't it? What you just described is such a holistic approach to looking after people as they go through that journey of stopping their addiction, and then the what next. Because I think a lot of people, when they think about stopping a behaviour, it's like they stop it, but then there's this big void. So so I really like what you just described in terms of the bigger picture around sort of well-being and rebuilding someone's life.
Yeah, I think that's what it's got to be, hasn't it? I think if you don't address the underlying issues first and foremost, I think that's really important. I think if you're not aware of why, you went down that route and became addicted to whatever substance or behaviour that may be, then you're really struggling. So the first thing you need is an awareness of actually what was going on for me. And the next thing you need to do is accept it. Accept this is where I am in my current reality of life, and then be able to create some sort of plan, create some action plan around what it is that I'm going to do, whether that be rehab, counselling, psychotherapy, work with psychologists, work with coaches, whatever it is. What I want to get across is that there's multiple pathways to recovery. A lot of people think you've got to go into rehab, you've got to speak to a counsellor, you've got to go this one route, but actually there's so many different routes to recovery. And I think it's really important that if you've tried one thing, that you don't give up hope, you go on and try the next thing. And over a period of time, I tried. 22-year-old was the first time that I ever had a counselling session around gambling addiction. It was 34 when I went into rehab, and that's a long period of time. And there was multiple attempts at trying to stop my addiction, which, for whatever reason, I just didn't manage to do. And what I found out in rehab was, because I wasn't trying to address the underlying issue, I was just trying to stop the action or stop the behaviour. And that would work for a period of time, but actually in the long run, What I really needed to do was to get to what was going on underneath the surface of myself, and start understanding my thought processes, my feelings, my emotions, my behaviours. And once I was able to do that, I stopped calling myself a gambling addict. I stopped calling myself a drug addict. I stopped calling myself an alcoholic. And it was like, sort your life out, Richie, because all these things are just your way of dealing with life. These are all just coping strategies. These aren't the root cause of the problem. And rehab was a great foundation for me to be able to unpick all of that and get some support around actually what is going on. And for me, you know, and this is my story, but I think there's a lot of sort of crossover with a lot of other people that I've spoke to, is feelings and emotions were something that I never wanted to face in my life. You know, I had a few traumatic things happen in my late teens. But even before that, when I was at school, you know, going through the education system, I was always that kid that was full of fear. And I always wanted to run away. So where I ended up running was the bookies the first time round, and then it was to recreational drugs, and then alcohol, and then in the end it was massively cocaine use, you know, and it was kind of a progressive thing that snowballed through my late teens into my 20s and early 30s. So yeah, once I put all them things into the same box, let's call it, and was able to address them all, is that's how I coped. Let's find different ways of coping, and let's deal with the real issues that's going on, which were my feelings and emotions. I was then able to, you know, sort them out and make progress in my life.
You articulate
Wow.
really well. Like, just hearing that is so powerful, because gosh, there's so much that we just said in terms of just how quickly things snowball, because things aren't right in people's lives, and it is coping strategy. And what you're saying really resonates with what Amantha and I believe in terms of avoiding sticking plasters, avoiding that just kind of a quick fix, and actually addressing the underlying root causes of problems, and which is obviously what you've discovered and has made all the difference to you, just in terms of you know, you can't just stop something. You've got to look at what was going on for you in your life and actually addressing that and recognizing that's your emotions, your feelings. Really, really powerful.
Yeah, I think it's what a lot of people do. You know, I see a wide range of people who are in completely different stages of their recovery after gambling harm, you know, and at some point on their journey, they generally get to the point where they have like one of them light bulb moments and put the pieces together, and they identify a period in their life that was traumatic, or, you know, they had unmet needs as a child, or, you know, they were just trying to rebel against something, you know, or a lot of people, you know, didn't get shown the love, or they didn't get shown the affection from parents. There was no sort of compassion. And, you know, I've done a lot of work around inner child as well. And I firmly believe that actually, if we all can support our inner child a little bit more, then, you know, we can be more compassionate, and we can actually address those underlying issues that can help people move forward in life, with compassion, with care, with understanding. But I firmly believe it has to come from within. You know, I think through my addiction, I was constantly looking for external validation around life, you know, that I was worthy, that I had a place in society, that I was successful, that, you know, I played a lot of football, and that was the start of my kind of adulthood, let's call it. I was involved in professional football at the age of 16, and I needed that, because that gave us worth, you know, that gave us worth at that time, because I had zero worth. And looking back, football was my first addiction. That was definitely the first addiction, because as soon as I was in that environment, I felt like I was part of something. You know, the outside world then didn't matter. The feelings and emotions that I struggled to deal with didn't matter, because I was on a football pitch and I was wanted and I was needed. But what I now know is that actually I was only a commodity of the football club, and I was only ever there whilst they've thought that I could add value to their football club. And as a human being, that's quite difficult when you get injured, you know, which was my story. I got injured and didn't play for 9 months. So how do you manage them feelings and emotions of not being able to play when actually that's where you get your self-worth from, and that's where you get your confidence from, and that's where you actually think you have value in life, you know. And when that's not there anymore, it strips you, it really strips you of all of themselves, self-esteem, self-confidence, self-worth. And I think it's so important for people to recognize that if you go inwards and internal, then you can find that self-worth and confidence and resilience within yourself. And that's when recovery really starts. Well, I believe recovery really starts when you can actually go internal and you can show compassion to yourself.
Oh, can I just say something? So I find that just so enriching, Richie, no pun intended, because so often when people come with midlife stresses, we've done an episode on stress already, done an episode on anxiety, sort of depression. These are all touch points and precursors along this journey, aren't they? And whether you end up with any of these, it's still important work to do. I mean, I've got my brain model literally right just there, because there's no single conversation in a coaching environment where we're not talking about where are these things manifesting. Is this an emotional response? Is this an unmet need? Often we forget that feelings and emotions that appear real formulate our thoughts, and then that's what we ruminate on. And then, like you say, if we don't have that capacity, or we've never been taught how to generate self-worth from within, then of course we are going to go looking for it. And out of curiosity, and I hope it's okay to ask you this, in those moments that you were leaning on those tools to cope and to survive, what did it get for you? Can you describe what was the trigger before a moment of reliance on something, be it gambling, alcohol, drugs? What was it you were trying to remove or dumb down or turn down? If you can explain it, that would be helpful.
I think for me it was complete escapism. It was escapism from the reality that was presented to us, and it wasn't actually the reality. It was my perception of the reality. It was my perception that I wasn't worthy. It was my perception that I didn't have a place in society. It was my perception I didn't have a belonging. And that's all it was. It was my story. It was my story in my head that was the problem a lot of the time, because actually I was loved. I have got a great family. I had great support networks, but I couldn't see that. I couldn't see that I had them things. And it was my perception of what was going on. And, I spent so much time in my head, in my own head, in my late teens and early 20s, that was what I needed to escape from. I needed to escape from them thoughts and feelings and unwanted emotions that came along, really. And once I found gambling in the first instance, as soon as I put that first bet on, that anticipation of what I could potentially win and that dopamine response that I got was phenomenal. And it was like, give me some more of this and let's not worry about the outside world. And it was, for me, it was just instant gratification I was looking for. It was instant, and that's what I got from addiction. Everything that I ever done, whether it be behavioural or substance, it was an instant response that I got. And that was all what I was always searching for. And I think that's how a lot of people end up addicted, is because they're searching for that instant hit that they got in the early days, and as it manifests, you need more of it. You need, in terms of gambling, you need more frequency, you need bigger bets, you need to be doing it more often. But it's all escapism for me. It was always about trying to avoid what was really going on. And I grew up in a very loving family. But a lot of me dad, for example, really struggled to show his emotion. So it wasn't something that I was brought up around. It wasn't something that I knew how to do. The men in the family didn't do it, so it was generational. And my granddad, for example, he was in the war, like how can they come back from a war and just integrate back into society and show love and compassion and care and affection and all them things when they've been on the front line of World War II, for example. So I don't blame anybody for it. It's just the truth of what went on.
But you're highlight a really good point, Richie, in that you appear to have everything. Like you had a loving family, and but you just didn't see it. And I think in terms of when people think about who is at risk of being vulnerable, we can all look at other people and think they appear to have it all. They appear to have a good job, or they appear to have a loving family, they appear to have a secure home, whatever our judgments are. But unless the person feels it, it doesn't make any sense, is it? And I think that's where we have to challenge some of our own assumptions about how other people are living, because we don't really know what's going on behind closed doors.
Yeah, totally. I think social media is a massive thing that plays into people's lack of self-worth and stuff, and we only ever see the highlight reel, don't we? I think that's the thing with social media. We only ever see the good things. And for me, in my journey, social media wasn't around in the early days of my addiction, so it isn't something that played a big part, but I see it now still, and my addiction can easily manifest itself into, let's sit and scroll on a social media app for the next 3 hours and lose half a day. And all I'm trying to do is, again, escape actually doing whatever needs to be done in life. So I am in recovery. I've been in recovery for 5.5 years now, but it's still not easy, and I can still see, these things manifest in other behaviours. So yeah, I think we've all got to be aware of and keep in check that I might never have presented as having an addiction, but I can have a lot of unhealthy behaviours that potentially could manifest into an addiction. And I'm really, one of the things that really does worry me in society these days, I've got an 8 and a 10-year-old son, and I can see how much already they want to rely on their devices, their iPads, their phones, and want to be part of that society that gets likes, gets a dopamine hit, basically, because that's all it is. It's a dopamine hit every time, and the 10-year-old, it's got to be really managed very carefully in today's society, I think, around how we manage that.
Because it's a fine line, isn't it? Because we do benefit from our dopamine. When we've got habits that are enriching, they add value to our lives, we were able to thrive. And when we were talking earlier, I sort of wanted people to, we don't want people scrolling or switching off this thinking that's not me, because I'm all right type thing. I'm all right, Jack. Because actually we're all like that, aren't we? If you talk about, I watched the interview with the guy from Friends who passed away very sadly, and it was on Newsnight of all things here in the UK. I don't know if you've seen the interview, and basically the interviewer is going, well, it's just free choice, isn't it? You're just making the wrong choices, you're choosing to do that. And I just was so impressed with him in terms of how he answered that question. He said, actually, no, I'm not. It's not free will anymore at this stage. I have to have strategies to make sure the first thought of the day sets me up for the rest of the day. And I want to bring that a little bit closer to home, because I think most of us, when you talk about that generation, actually a lot of that generation are now leaders in organisations, Richie. So they don't come from a place of compassion. They come from a place of tough love, few hard knocks. We don't do the compassion thing around here. So I'm very aware that a lot of those leaders in their 50s and 60s will have had parents, similar to yours, with those same narratives bubbling around, just like you pull your socks up and get on with it type thing. That's part of the problem. Part of the reason we're doing this series is because actually we need to readdress that balance, which is actually those people who have access to a mobile phone are probably leaning on things in an addictive type way. Maybe they're not calling it that, they're calling it something else, whether that's you having to have your coffee before 9 o'clock in the morning, whether that's your fixation with listening to a certain radio station. We all have that ability to be inflexible about things, and then when it encroaches into our physiology, and that's when we start to lose control, isn't it? Because actually there it becomes a physiological need within the body to either have that dopamine hit, to have that substance. I mean, you only have to watch the Netflix series all about oxycodone to see just how damaging and how it ruins whole families. So can you see also that maybe there is an apathy in society that it's I'm all right, Jack, it's nothing to do with me, that happens to other people?
Yeah, totally. I think there was a big campaign this year around the Addiction Awareness Week, and the title for that week was Everybody Knows Somebody. And I firmly believe that, I firmly believe that everybody does know somebody. It's said that a person with an addiction has 10 affected others, you know, generally. And that's massive, you know, and I could probably name 20 people that were massively affected through my addiction, you know, whether that be people who'd employed us or, you know, colleagues at work even, my parents, my children, my partner at the time, friends, family. It just goes on, you know, and if you actually, it's like dropping a pebble in the water, isn't it? The ripple effect is just phenomenal. So it does really affect everybody. I think what I would say though is so does recovery. So does recovery, and offering that support and that sort of holding space for somebody that to be able to explore what's going on for them without trying to fix them, I think is the thing that so many people need in their life. And once they find that person that can be non-judgmental, can be empathetic, and can show some sort of understanding, it can massively change somebody's world there and then, because then they feel heard, then they feel supported. And judgment's massive, stigma's massive, especially around addiction that's substance misuse or behavioural, like sex or drugs, sex or gambling, for example. But there's so many other addictions out there that aren't perceived with stigma, you know, and I've got to be very careful because I can see my addiction manifests in other ways. And
Yes.
started playing golf, believe it or not. I got in recovery and I started playing golf, and I was like, I'm getting good at this. I'm going to play more golf, And then it got to a point where I was like, should I pick the kids up on Sunday or should I play the golf competition? I was like, whoa, you know, that's old Richie talking. That's the old addicted personality coming through again. But I was like, I'm playing well. I could win this golf competition. And that anticipation of winning a golf competition and the dopamine hit I got from it was like phenomenal. But actually, you've got to check yourself every now and again. And that's golf, you know. And anybody that plays golf will probably say I'm probably addicted to it as well because it's that type of sport. But you've got to really be careful. Something else that I've really noticed recently, I'm very passionate about my job. Like, I love it so much, and it gives us passion and purpose and fulfillment and self-worth like nothing I've ever had before. But we're in a very, very busy period at the moment, and we've got a lot of events. And last week I found myself working 3 days till 9 o'clock or after. And I was like, I had to check in with my team and say, I've just got to tell you all this because I need to get it out there and I've got to address it because it's not good and it's not a behaviour that I want to continue. But to everybody else, it's like, look at Richie, he's doing really well, he's succeeding, you know, he's putting all that work in and all that effort in. But actually, it was complete addictive behaviour, you know. So even though I'm 5.5 years in recovery, I've still got to check myself all of the time. And this can manifest in anybody at any given time. And I know you've spoke a little bit around stress and depression and them types of things, but that's just another manifestation for me in a different way, just taking a different route. And that's the way they felt. It's like come out in them a little bit. So trying to get to the root cause is always what I try and encourage people to do and explore what's really going on. But then also, how do you overcome that, and how do you put boundaries in place, and how do you look after yourself, and what coping strategies have you got, and what's your support network like? Because all of them things are the things that can change somebody's world.
I really think what you just said is really thought-provoking in terms of what addiction is, because your recognition that your golf is one thing, but also just how you have got stuck into work and how suddenly you find yourself completely consumed by that. And I think, again, when we're thinking about who is affected, who's at risk of addiction, it really sort of brings that message home that we are all susceptible. And actually, when we think about addiction, and maybe addiction's the wrong term, maybe we should be calling it something else in terms of what is it that you feel completely consumed by, or whatever the language is. Because I think we all could think of something that we slightly obsess over, or we just want, we almost have that craving for to do more of, or to engage with, to feel really good about stuff. And that's almost what we're talking about when we're talking about addiction and the potential for that to become really problematic, rather than it just being something like kind of what we think of classic as drugs, alcohol, and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think addiction is quite a harsh word in the English society,
Mm.
um, and a lot of people hear it and turn away from it because automatically they assume drink, drugs, gambling now is on the rise massively. So them things are, what people associate with, but actually addiction can, like I said, manifest in so many different ways. But what actually is addiction? For me, I think it's quite easy to break down in terms of it's an excessive behavior that causes your life to become unmanageable. And that's the thing that, some people don't recognize. Is the thing or the behavior, the substance taking you away from the person that you want to be? And if it is, then it's got to get in check. You've got to try and get it in check. And however you do that, I think is finding your own way. Like I said earlier, there's multiple pathways to recovery. Is it through support groups? Is it through therapy? Is it through setting limits? Is it through having an accountability coach? Is it through working with somebody within an organization that can offer that guidance or help? There's so many different ways, but a lot of people don't recognize the behavior, but and I think for me, you've just got to work out, who do I want to be? What's my values and what's my morals? And what takes us away from my values and morals? And when you can do that, you can really, get to the behavior or the substance or the thing, let's call it the thing, that is actually, is giving you the dopamine response, or the little hit, or the avoidance, or the escapism. And once you do that, I think you can start addressing it, because actually everything in life starts with an awareness. And once you create that awareness, you've then got to ask yourself questions. And if you can ask yourself the right type of questions, it can take you to the next place, which hopefully is, what action do I need to take to help myself and help those around us?
And that's, sorry, Lisa, I was just saying that's really important, because when we're thinking about this in the context of work, then, I mean, that's challenging enough, isn't it? If you're just dealing with that. We know that wellbeing programs largely don't work. And one of the reports I read yesterday talked about expectation being the biggest problem in the workplace. And so sort of linking that to maybe putting both camps in the same place then, which is to say, actually, how much is work responsible for this? Or how much does work precipitate the manifestation? I like the word, when you were talking about replacing a word, Lisa, I thought compulsion. For me, how much does compulsion drive our behaviors, or motivation? Because there is a motivation about doing the same thing over and over and over and over again. You're getting something as a result of it, even if you don't realize. If you look at that whole thing on your mobile phone, how many times you pick your mobile phone up every day, I think it would shock people. It will be over 100 times a day for most people, and that each time is a dopamine hit. But if your boss is got high expectations of you, and I have been this person, high levels of presenteeism, high levels of getting things right, because actually that in itself is rewarding for you, either because you're really enjoying your work, but then actually when it starts to be perceived as, like you said, Richie, you're successful, you're winning, you're our top performer at work, it then drives that behavior to keep doing more, which then drives the whole reliance on, actually, I can't keep going, so what do you do instead? So now then your stress levels are off the charts, you're not looking after yourself, but you are first person in, last person out, and and you're applauded for that. It's like, wow, Amantha, she's always here, she's always turning up. But that then drives other people's expectations of you to expect that of you, because you don't say no.
Yeah.
So how do we bring that awareness into the workplace, which is actually, how does someone, what masking strategies do you think people are using in the workplace who clearly are somewhere on this continuum? Either they're at the stress stage, either they're at the anxiety stage, either they might be at the depression stage, they might be in full-blown addiction, where, like you say, excessive behavior, which makes your life unmanageable, but you're still turning up for work. What strategies do you think people are deploying on a daily basis to show up in the workplace?
I think for me, I always performed at work. I always was in employment. I had really, really bad unbelievable amounts of, gambling addiction going on in my early 20s, but I still turned up at work every day. I presented as being, a very successful young 20-year-old guy, basically. Mid-20s, I started my own business, my own health and well-being business, looking after other people's health and well-being, believe it or not. So I had contracts with the NHS to run fall prevention work. I'd done cardiac rehab, pulmonary rehab. I was working with occupational therapists, physiotherapists, psychologists on a daily basis. And most of the time I'd had cocaine. And it wasn't there that they could see it, but actually that was the truth of the matter. And there were so many other things that actually, if somebody was just had any understanding of addiction, they probably would have been able to spot it. I was in and out of the toilets. I was on and off my phone, gambling all the time. Quite secretive. Nobody ever seen me screen. Nobody ever seen what I was actually on. Always turning my phone upside down. So there's lots of things or sort of behaviours that people do to avoid in and out of the toilet. To watch a race, watch a horse race, or spin on a roulette wheel, or all of this stuff's done on your phone now. So in the past, in the early days of my gambling addiction, I had to go in the boogies, but towards the end I didn't. And I think that's something that we need to be aware of in today's society, that it's so accessible to gamble, but actually all of them other things as well, drink, drugs, you do so much of that before your physical appearance starts to change, or you slur your words, or you smell of alcohol or whatever. So there's lots of other things that people can do to hide what's actually really going on. And I think having just a way of not confronting, but offering support. If somebody had come up to me and said, "What's going on, Richie?" there would have been complete denial, shut down. If somebody had said to us, "Richie, if what's going on and you ever want to talk, feel free to come and have a word," that would be completely different, and that's kind of what did happen in the end. Me and my mum had this kind of fractious relationship where we were very similar people. We were both very stubborn. My mum just wanted to fix her son. Basically, that's all it was. Underlying everything, my mum just wanted her son to get well and sort himself out. And then 3 months before I went into rehab, my mum came to us and she gave us 2 phone numbers, and she just said, "One day you might want to use them phone numbers," and left. And I was like, where's the argument? Where's the confrontation? This isn't me mum. But I took them numbers and put them in my bedside drawer. In the past, there would have been confrontation. I would have ripped the numbers up. I would have thrown them away. I would have put them in the bin. But my mum changed her tact, let's call it. And it was that thing that, I had an episode where I'd lost a lot of money. I'd not gambled for a long period of time, and then I'd relapsed. And that was the time when I was like, I had a lot of suicidality and I wanted to check out of life. Luckily for me, I was confronted by a woman. I was standing on the Tyne Bridge in Newcastle, and I was confronted by a woman who basically said, "I don't know what's going on for your son. Like, you might feel like dying today, but you probably don't want to die for the rest of your life." And that was me completely breaking down. And it was exactly right. The statement was exactly right. I wanted out of that moment, but I didn't want out of life. And I'd had suicidal ideology for a long period of time. But that moment in my sort of journey was just a massive pivotal point. And from there, I went home, went in the bedside table, took one of the numbers out my mum gave us, which was for Sporting Chance, which is a residential rehab for people who've been involved in professional sport of some sort. Rang them, and 3 weeks later, I was in rehab. And it was that was me taking ownership of that. And it wasn't my mum saying, "You need help, go here, go there, do this, do that." And that was very different to what had happened previously. I remember my mum marching us into a Gamblers Anonymous meeting at one point. "You need to go here." And my mum going into a room next door, which was a meeting called Gamanon. So that's for family members affected by gambling. And my mum going in that room and me walking back out, and then 10 minutes before the meeting finished, I would walk back in the room so my mum could meet us coming out of the door again. And it's them behaviours of going, "I don't want to be here. Like, why am I?" And that tends to what happened when people try and fix you. And that's, with all good intent and will in the world, you'll never be able to fix somebody that doesn't want help. But what you've got to try and be able to do is to hold space for them, and allow them to explore what's going on for themselves, and just sit with empathy and non-judgment, you know, because as soon as anybody feels any type of judgment, then they're going to shut down and they're going to run away and they're going to go back to whatever it was that they were trying to talk to her about anyway. So, you know, if you do want to help somebody, I think it's massively important that you learn good communication skills, and that's not something that we all have, if I'm brutally honest. And when we struggle with empathy, because it's not something that's been around our lives consistently. So learning how to show empathy, especially in an organizational environment, and having the skill set to be able to, you know, ask what we call thoughtful questions and use the right words to allow people just to really pour the heart out, you know, is what you tend to get. And if you ask the right questions, you can do that really well. So to learn to hold space is probably the thing I would be really encouraging anybody to do that wants to help anybody else.
I really, really like that though, Richie, because if people think they've got to fix something, it also means they've automatically got to have some sense of answer or where to go and what to do. And there's a lot of pressure on people thinking that they've got to solve a problem. And I think for some people that can make them back right off. You know, they don't know what to say or what to do or how to deal with someone who's struggling with addiction because they've not encountered this before. And what we're getting through, there's a consistent message through all the topics that we're talking about through the Resilience Collective, is that the one kind of common aspect is that if everyone can just hold more space and show compassion and not be judgmental, you know, be open-minded and create that, and that does mean, you know, empathy and so on, and those are, you know, we can learn how to have compassionate conversations. But if we can get that bit right, then whether someone's struggling with anxiety, depression, addiction, whatever their coping strategy is, or whatever's manifesting, we can support that person. And it's not then about having all the right answers to know exactly what to do. And I think that takes pressure off people and makes it a bit more easy to engage with, a bit more like, oh, I can do that. That's having a nice, caring conversation. Takes the pressure off.
Yeah, totally. And holding space, that, like you say, it can help people in so many different ways. And it doesn't matter whether it's addiction, whether it's stress, whether it's depression, whether it's any other sort of anything that falls on that continuum, let's call it. I think by holding space for somebody, and for me, the greatest feeling that I ever got was when somebody made me feel heard. And that was the changing point for me. Somebody got it, you know, and somebody just understood that, understood without judgment that Richie's struggling and I'm just going to hold space for him. You know, I'm not going to say anything. I'm not going to fix him, but just allow him to speak. Because that's what we need to do, really. All of my problems were caused in my head, were the stories that I was telling myself. And when I was actually able to tell somebody else the stories that are going on in my head, they sounded ridiculous anyway. You know, like they sounded like, wow, is that really what I'm telling myself day in, day out? And just having somebody to bounce that off was sometimes, you know, helped us make a different decision, helped us choose a different path, helped us go a different way in life. And I still do that now. I still have people in my life now that, you know, I've got a really strong group of friends and support network, but I still have therapy, you know, I still have supervision because of the type of work that I do. And I still work with a coach because I firmly believe that people can help us get to where I want to be and help us unpick what's going on a lot faster than me trying to do it on my own. And I've got no shame in that now. You know, when I first asked for help, I thought it was shameful, and, you know, I thought I would be judged, and I thought everybody would, you know, kind of call us names. You know, who's going to call people names for asking for help? But that's kind of the perception I had of society. So perception's not like that. Ever since I shared my story with anybody, all I've ever had off anybody is, well done. I'm really pleased that you're addressing it and you're trying to sort the issues out. You know, and I've also learned that actually somebody else's opinion about me is nothing to do with me. Absolutely nothing to do. It's their opinion, and they're entitled to it. It's about how do I handle that, and that's internal again. and that's the joy of not needing that external validation from other people. And I'm not going to lie, I still sometimes like that. I'm a human being. Still sometimes like somebody saying you're doing well, Richie, or giving us a bit of praise. I do like that, but I don't need it. And I think that's the difference now in my life. I do still strive to do things that are adding to society, let's say, but it's a different need. Now I like it, but I don't really need it to know that actually I can be a decent human being.
Are there any other, you've said so much today already, are there any other kind of key messages that you think are useful to leave listeners with in terms of what they can do to be helpful? So you mentioned earlier some of engaging with addictive behaviour at the moment, but sometimes you have, I think you said, unhealthy behaviours that potentially manifest themselves into addictive behaviours. Is there anything you would want to highlight now, just as we begin to wrap up, about things to look out for? You've already suggested you've been to toilets or being on a phone, or and things to do to help. So holding the space, showing empathy, not being non-judgmental. Is there anything else in terms of what people should be looking for or what they should be doing to be helpful in this space?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing to watch out for is isolation. Is when people start to become much more reserved or isolate themselves or avoid certain situations or scenarios. Because for me, addiction massively manifests into isolation, and people will then start doing things on their own. They'll start avoiding people's calls. They'll not engage in social activities, and they'll really remove themselves. And sometimes that can be difficult when people are still in work or still going to work. Myself, I would turn up for work religiously. I'd be on time. I'd be there, and presenting as everything being okay. But actually, when the night out came, or Christmas is coming up, who's coming to the Christmas party, who's not coming to the Christmas party? Is there any underlying issue to why people aren't? If people are at the Christmas party, excessive, just somebody's having a really good time doesn't mean that they've got an addiction as well. People allowed to let their hair down. So don't be judgmental, I think, is probably the thing I would be saying. And yeah, definitely hold space without judgment. And that I honestly believe if we can become a society who learns how to hold space for people, we can have a very, very different society moving forward. But that is a big, massive task at hand. And the last thing, a lot of people want to fix people. And that's generally what I've found, is because there's something that they haven't addressed in their own life. So if you are a massive fixer, ask yourself the question, what are you avoiding? What am I avoiding by trying to fix this other person? And see if I can go and fix a little bit of myself. And that doesn't necessarily mean that there's a full-blown addiction, but is there something else that is missing in your life, whether it be a bit of resilience, confidence, self-worth, self-esteem? Go and work on yourself a little bit. And yeah, I see a lot of people trying to pour from an empty cup, let's say, and I think it's important that you try and fill your own cup up so that you can be in the best possible space to help others.
Gosh, you have said so much.
Really, really powerful, really powerful. I like that, because I think it's an opportunity for people to reflect on themselves, actually, because a lot of people's behaviours about stuff maybe they're not dealing with shows up in how they're approaching other people. So I think that's really profound. I think actually if anyone gets to the end of this episode and hears you say that, I think they will see it as an opportunity to be less judgmental. But I do believe it also drives a greater need, because we know wellbeing programs don't work. It actually has to be something much more basic than that. And I think it is how we communicate with one another, how we hold space for one another. Are we doing all the talking or are we doing all the listening? Either extremes isn't great, but actually being able to ask those well-formed questions, sitting in a place of curiosity rather than judgment, And actually knowing that actually the person in front of you is probably taking huge amounts of courage to actually be vulnerable. You know, being vulnerable is not easy for so many people. And I would imagine those people with addiction, it's even harder, because you are dealing with stuff on a daily basis. And I think for myself as well, it's about, we don't want people, you know, sort of taking the wrong message here either, which is, it's not about observing people from afar and putting two and two together and getting some sort of conclusion that is not right, because that's not helpful either. But I think if managers have good relationships with their employees, they would know a change in behaviour, they would see a change in behaviour, they would be able to moderate and certainly say, this is not Richie's norm, or this is not Amantha's norm, this is out of character, and therefore it would require a conversation. So I agree with everything you've said. You just said it even better. I feel the responsibility is on both parties, you as an individual, but also as your organisation, to support you. And that's not like a tick box exercise, like, had the conversation done, moving on, now can we ask you to get back to being your brilliant self at work? Because I hear an awful lot of that. I feel if I had a pound for every time someone has said to me, well, we've put a lot of investment behind this person already and we're not really seeing very much back.
Yeah,
that's probably a whole conversation for a whole other day. But I think it is about, if you really value a person, actually, you, who knows how long that journey is going to be, but actually you'll get that, I don't want to say gratitude, but when someone has been helped, there is a difference that comes back. People are you know, are loyal. They want to do well. They want to do good, and for probably better reasons, I would say. So
yeah, I see a lot of in a lot of corporate environments. I see a lot of like policies around drugs and alcohol and all that sort of stuff, but I never really see a pathway of recovery or a pathway of support in these policies. And if you want people to reach out and ask for help and sort their issues out so they can then go on to perform at a much better level, the people need the help, need to know that it's there and it's on offer, and it's not just going to be dismissal or, you know, sort of judgment on them. And I think that would go a long way in being able to help people come and identify and reach out and say, can I join that recovery program, or can I join that support program? Because that would just bring people into the real world of, how do I actually move forward and get the help and support I need? But I don't see it very often.
Richie, we're going to put your details and the Epic Restart Foundation's details in the show notes, and I'll also put them in the resource. And we would urge people to listen to this conversation, actually just to share it far and wide, because as we've already discussed today, we all know somebody. So I think keeping that awareness would be really helpful. We'd also be encouraging people to download the resource that will be available, and read that, digest it, think about it, reflect on it, discuss it with your team colleagues, and just think about how, you know, what that means for you as a team, what that means for you as a friendship group, and how often do you check in. I was talking to a male colleague yesterday. He's like, as guys, we don't check in with each other. So actually have that conversation, you know. So it's about, again, normalizing the conversations that we need to have around this stuff, and follow the Resilience Collective, hashtag the Resilience Collective on LinkedIn. I will urge people to do that, because they can keep up to date with all the other resources and everything that we're talking about in this space. And Matt, have you got anything to add?
Only just a huge amount of gratitude to Richie, because you know, facts tell people stuff, don't they? And you could read a whole load of facts and could repeat them parrot fashion, but actually, you know, it's stories that land with us, because, like, coming full circle to what Richie said, you know, stories create feelings and feelings create those emotions. And so I found it hugely emotional and a great amount of feeling to hear your story. And I think that's what people will remember, that actually the success is in supporting one another, isn't it? Actually, that's how companies should rate themselves in terms of success? How much are we supporting our people, or is it all loaded, front loaded with expectation? Because if it is, that isn't support. So I think you've done a great service, and I'm definitely going to take more of a look at the work that you're doing. I know a lot of the corporates that I'm working with would find your work hugely valuable, and we need to sort of take it out of the shadows even more, don't we, and firmly put it on the stage where it belongs. So thank you so much. Really grateful for your vulnerability and you're willing to share. That's been amazing.
No, thank you for the invite.
Thank you, Richie.
You're welcome.